Welcome to the week ahead. We're doing this live straight from the All Asia Broadcasting Centre in Bukit Jalil. My name is Ibrahim Sani. This show will unpack the events that will take place in the next 7 days to come. And most interestingly enough, a few hours ago, both the government and Pakatan Harapan leaders have announced that they will sign a Memorandum of Understanding on a bipartisan cooperation tomorrow on Monday at 5 p.m. at the Parliament. Representatives from both the government and the opposition have finalized the so-called MOU. This MOU will be between the federal government and Pakatan on the proposed reforms. All parties agreed that the MOU is to ensure political stability in the fight against COVID-19 and to save lives and livelihoods of the people. In a joint statement on Sunday, today, September 12th, it said that the signing will take place at the Parliament Banquet Hall after the session ends. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob and several other opposition leaders will be present. It will be amongst them the PKR President as well as the Chairman for Pakatan Harapan, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, DAP Secretary General Lim Guan Eng, Amanah President Muhammad Sabu and UPCO President Datuk Wilfred Marius Tangau. On Saturday, yesterday, the Pakatan Presidential Council said it was inclined to accept the MOU that was offered by the Prime Minister following a meeting between the opposition leaders and the Prime Minister on August 25th. This is, of course, in tandem with the call that was made by the King, Yang di-Pertuan Agong, saying that the parties between the political divide must continue on to serve the government and to serve the people in order for us to combat the COVID-19 collectively. The government, of course, is trying to move forward in tandem with the opposition on this matter. And of course, one needs to argue that this is the first time that the federal level legislative system will see the cooperation between the government and the opposition. So all eyes tomorrow, Monday, 5 p.m. will be on the government members as well as the opposition members moving ahead with this MOU. Of course, this MOU can be classified as a federal level confidence and supply agreement, but more details will be fleshed out, most importantly, tomorrow. So those are the kind of the breaking news event that has just taken place a few hours ago. We now move on to our first story, which is, of course, the government agreeing to implement the administration and parliamentary reforms to restore political stability in order to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and economic recovery. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said that the reforms include the tabling of an anti-hopping law that was first mooted by Pengerang MP Datuk Azalina Osman, saying that this kind of anti-hopping law is meant to solve all the issues surrounding the political quagmire that the country is going through. On top of that, there will be other reforms such as limiting the term of the Prime Minister role to 10 years.
In a statement this evening, the Cabinet agreed to amend the federal constitution to expedite the implementation of the lowered voting age from 21 years old to 18. The Cabinet also agreed to ensure equal representation between opposition MPs and government backbenchers in parliamentary special select committees. Among other reforms, to give greater recognition to the opposition members by including them in the National Recovery Council to share views and propose improvements. Opposition leaders will also receive remuneration and privileges equivalent to a minister.
The parliamentary reforms are going to be critical for us to observe in the days to come. But like I said, this is in tandem with the earlier story, breaking story that we made just a few minutes ago upon the collective agreement done between the opposition members as well as the government members. The second story that we need to focus on, of course, is on Undi 18, or lowering the voting age for those eligible to be voting from 21 years old currently to 18 years old. De facto Law Minister Datuk Seri Wan Junaidi Tunku Jaafar said that the government will comply with the court order to implement Undi 18 by December 31st this year. He said that there are no plans to appeal against the Kuching High Court ruling last week.
The High Court in Kuching, Sarawak directed the government and the Election Commission to lower the voting age from 21 to 18 by the December 31st deadline. Wan Junaidi said as of now, there is no directive from the government to appeal. Hence, what is decided by the court is the law that needs to be abided by. The new voting age was approved by Parliament in 2019 but has yet to be implemented.
A third idea that we need to keep an eye out on this week, in fact tomorrow, is on the confidence vote, because previously we've seen how the palace says that whoever takes over the premiership must test that confidence in the August House. However, this confidence vote topic has been waning in recent days, and we are quite unsure whether or not there even will be a confidence vote to be held when the Parliament resumes its session starting tomorrow, Monday, September 13th. So meanwhile, Datuk Wan Junaidi said that Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob does not need to go through a confidence vote in Parliament tomorrow. He said that the message was conveyed by the Prime Minister when he chaired his first cabinet meeting last week. Wan Junaidi explained that the confidence vote or vote of confidence was not stated in the country's system nor the law, but it had been done before to show that the Prime Minister had the majority support. According to him, Ismail Sabri said that the King, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, had met with lawmakers who stated their support for him and was of the opinion that the MPs would not have to change their stand in such a short time. As such, His Majesty, according to Wan Junaidi, said that he has given a consent that there was no need for a confidence vote. Now, it's important for us to understand that this was a statement coming in from the Law Minister or the de facto Law Minister. No such statement has come from the palace on this matter, and we want to understand what's the next step for the government on this topic. What we do know is that following the opposition signing the MOU with the government just a few hours ago, there might not be a challenge to have the confidence vote upon the resumption of the parliamentary sitting tomorrow. So, all can be said that the confidence vote might not necessarily happen, but who knows? Things like this will always have a turn for the fun, so it's important for us to keep an eye out on that. That's enough parliamentary topic for the time being. We'll go for one short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit about COVID-19. Welcome back. This is The Week Ahead. My name is Ibrahim Sani. This show explores the kind of items that will take place next week. Before we jump into the story of COVID now, we want to highlight a little bit of further information on the lineup when it comes to Pakatan Harapan. A story carried on astroawani.com highlights the announcement made by Pakatan Harapan very recently that some key lineups have been made. Predominantly Saifrina Nasution and Fahmi Fadzil are those that have been appointed as some of the key figures when it comes to Pakatan Harapan. In fact, some key other appointments include Howard Lee, the Adun from Perak, has been appointed as the Ketua Pemuda of Pakatan Harapan, or the Youth Chief. This is of course following the untimely demise of the previous Youth Chief of Pakatan Harapan following the COVID pandemic. Also, Senator Aiman Athira has been made the Women's Chief of Pakatan Harapan, and the strategy for the Director of Strategy for Pakatan Harapan will be Amanas Datuk Sri Salahuddin Ayub. On top of this, Anthony Lok of Negeri Sembilan of DAP has been appointed as the Chief Whip Coordinator that will coordinate all the Chief Whips from the 3 or now 4 Pakatan Harapan parties. Fahmi Fadzil will be the Communications Director of not only PKR but also the Pakatan Harapan as well. Let's move now on to the story of COVID now. Because a few days ago, in a bid to be more transparent, the Health Ministry launched COVID Now, a one-stop website for all COVID-19 information, with a promise that the data will be shared to the public. Now, the conversation of how this will initiate or assist in the country's overall management of COVID-19 still needs to be seen. The AWANI Tonight team earlier in the week spoke to a public health specialist, Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Farhan Rusli, on how should these data be analysed.
I think it's a good move from the ministry to actually start presenting data. And we have been asking for this for the past 1 year, saying that access to data needs to be open source and it needs to be available to the public so that they know what's really happening. But as we see with the data, when KJ spoke about a backlog of cases that is the reason why the number of deaths are quite high in certain places that have high number of vaccination. This also is a major issue that needs to be tackled, because when you raise up issues of backlogs, such as reporting numbers of deaths, then you will start to question whether your reporting number of cases are also from the backlog. Because now that encroaches into the question of data integrity. How accurate is the data to represent the time that the data is being stated at?
It's important for the data to reflect real COVID-19 situations, said Dr. Farhan. With that information at hand, data can be used more effectively to predict upcoming challenges and measures to remedy them.
The data that is being taken in, it has to be analyzed, and you have to use complex predictive analysis in order for you to actually be able to know what may happen, what is the likelihood of something happening in the next 1 or 2 weeks. Because you have a treasure trove of data for the past 1.5 years. That data, if analyzed using the right tools, will be able to tell us where we're going to be in the next 1 week, where we're going to be in the next 2 weeks, which states need help in 3 weeks' time, so that we're able to deliver and put our resources to that area so that they do not go on brinking of collapse, such as what's happening in the northern states now. This data must be used really, really well to ensure that whatever we do has a sort of KPI or an indicator that we're trying to target. For example, if I say that in 3 weeks, the data will show that the cases will rise to X number, but we are going to be doing this, and this to ensure that it is only 50% of that. So which means that we have a 50% reduction through active interventions.
Of course, it must be said that yesterday and today, COVID-19 attracted some form of confusion by the members of the public. This is in relation to the over 500 deaths being registered. And it seems like it's actually spread over a few weeks. And it's also important to note that this is in relation to when the administration of the country was in limbo, where we did not have an executive body, we didn't have a health minister, we didn't have a prime minister then. But because of this, it has brought to the attention of some members of the public to ask better clarity into how the data is being presented, both by the statements that is coming out from the health ministry, as well as how the data is going to be represented on COVID Now. Those are the kind of teething challenges that COVID Now and the new health minister, Yang Berhormat Khairi Jamaluddin, has to navigate. This is just a small taste of the kind of full-blown data that is going to be transparent coming out from the health ministry. It's not going to be easy, but more importantly, it can get easily convoluted and, most importantly, can easily be misconstrued by users of the data that might not, number one, have full information of the story of what is going on with it when it comes to data, and number two, the utility of the data and whether or not these data truly reflect the correctness, the timeliness, and the completeness of the situation on the ground. Those are the kind of stories that you will see taking place next week when it comes to COVID Now, and of course, by extension, the story of how COVID-19 will develop. Our next story revolves around how self-testing is going to be moving forward. This is because as the country prepares to transition into the endemic phase of COVID-19, a number of routines have to be put in place in order to ensure the virus remains under control. This includes regular self-testing and regular self-monitoring. Because of this, the AWANI Tonight team last week spoke to community medicine expert from UKM, Professor Dr. Sharifah Izzat, on normalizing self-testing.
She reminded the public that being fully vaccinated does not mean you cannot catch the virus or transmit it to others.
So what happens is that you need to self-test, and this is very important because even though you are vaccinated, you might actually harbor the virus, but you can actually be carrying so-called the category 1, that means you are asymptomatic. So when that happens, basically you are carrying the virus and you might actually still transmit this to other people unknowingly. It can be your family members, it can be part of your community. So this is very good so that if you are or you think that you are susceptible or you're high risk, or you're going into some area where there could be pockets of population who are unvaccinated, even though this could be your kampong and things like that, you should test yourself.
Sharifa also said that those who work in high-risk environments must prioritize regular self-testing, some as regular as twice a week.
This could be frontliners. This could be people who are really working with the community. It could be head of the villages or things like that, because you're in contact with many people, or you're in contact with, let's say, foreigners, or some of your workers who might be foreigners and so on. So in certain situations, example, in UK, they are very strict on this. That means that before they come into work, they need to actually self-test. And that self-test is only valid for 48 hours, so 3 days. So you need to do it, quite regularly before you come to work. And also you need to do it probably twice in a week. So to ensure that you're continuously negative. Now, in certain situations, maybe if you're in the frontliners, like I mentioned just now, so these are people who might actually need to do it more regularly compared with the others who are really just maybe housewife or things like that. But if you have been in recent contact with many people, or you're having some symptoms, that could be possibility saying that you could have COVID, you need to self-test.
She also urged the government to subsidize self-test kits and distribute them to rural areas, making it accessible to all.
And in certain areas, such as the rural areas, I reiterate that probably the government needs to subsidize even the test kits. And this could be distributed to local community dealers or the health clinics or the health centers and things like that.
If you want to explore more, go to covidnow.moh.gov.my and you can get the latest information regarding the COVID situation in the country. We'll go for one more short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more on what's going to happen next week. You're watching The Week Ahead. One more story that needs to be kept in focus is, of course, the unemployment figures in the country. This is because as of August, more than 40,000 people have lost their jobs in Malaysia. This is, of course, according to the Human Resources Minister, Datuk Sri M. Saravanan. He says that the data shows that in a month, an average of 5,811 cases of loss of employment were reported by the ministry.
He said SOCSO's employment insurance system is monitoring the loss of employment trend daily. This is to provide protection to workers who lost their jobs for various reasons, including redundancy, voluntary or mutual separation schemes, closure of companies from natural disasters, bankruptcy or constructive dismissal. The government has introduced various measures to alleviate the burden of the people and ensure businesses can continue to operate. This includes pemulih programs such as the Wage Subsidy Program, Penjana Kerjaya and Kerjaya Gig, which are targeted at employers, employees, job seekers and self-employed.
Which brings to the question of how jobs will take place after the pandemic or when this COVID-19 becomes an endemic in this country. The nature of work is, of course, changing rapidly, especially since COVID-19 has forced us to adopt new ways of doing things. According to a survey by Randstad Malaysia, Malaysians are prioritizing work-life balance even more. So because of this, Astro AWANI spoke to the head of operations, Fahad Naim, to understand the shift and if work will return to pre-pandemic arrangements.
Based on Randstad's latest survey, 62% employees prefer attractive salary and benefits, while 60% prefer organizations that offer work-life balance as their employee value propositions. Compared to 2020, there was a 21% increase in Malaysians who chose work-life balance as top value proposition in 2021.
So there are a total of 16 factors which we've been considering for many years when we do the survey. Before that, we have been giving 5 different factors when it comes to pick up your employer. Now the respondent list, we're given 16 different, but still work-life balance and the salary came out to be the top. But again, every year we see a significant increase year to year where work-life balance is becoming the priority. So I think and down the road, a couple of years' time, looks like number one thing where people are going to look for in an ideal employer would be work-life balance.
The report also revealed 70% respondents worked remotely at some point in 2020, while 1 in 4 worked exclusively from home. However, Fahad said the challenges faced by employees was the transition to remote work.
It is so difficult to set the boundaries when you work from home between your personal life and work life. Means they need to make a deliberate efforts to make sure employees understand what is working hours, and they don't end up responding back to emails after dinner. It could be making sure that they are understanding that they have to limit the work-related conversations to emails and only work-related platform rather than switching it to WhatsApp, which is quite common nowadays.
As companies gear up to resume work from the office, Fahad says HR managers will need to review existing policies to suit post-pandemic future.
Employers basically now need to be, understood how they're going to be managed remotely, their staff and workforce. So if you look at the other factors, so HR policies need to be revised and changed to some extent, where now the expectation has definitely increased. And now employees are also expecting some level of work from home benefits. So it could be, purchasing some IT equipments, working from home. It could be some extra allowance, could be on a Wi-Fi or a data plan or a phone allowance or something. So these are some of the expectations which HR and organizations need to revise and think of how they're going to improve it. Some of the companies we've been speaking with, they have somewhat invested in a lot of different online tools in order to make sure that they are able to more effectively measure productivity from employees. So now the approach is changing in a remote environment from a process-driven to more outcome-driven.
Have you been affected by job losses, or are you interested in learning more about how jobs will take place in the future? Tag us at AWANI News. Tell us what you think about the job situation in the country. You can also tag me directly at Ibrahim Saninat, either on Twitter or on Instagram. Tell us your story. We want to listen. Our final event that might take place next week is, of course, on the house prices. Because house prices in Malaysia have remained unaffordable despite the sector facing the issues of oversupply, overhang for the longest of time, REFSA's Lillian Wee outlines a few measures the government can make or take in making homes or owning a house more attainable. This includes a relook of policies to strengthen the rental market.
I believe that housing is a fundamental right, regardless of your income, your class, race, gender, etc. And so the goal here is to ensure that everyone, right, whether during the pandemic or non-pandemic times, will have a secure roof over their heads, regardless of your housing tenure, whether it's home ownership or whether it's rental. When you're asking about solutions, I think in the short term, the government can look into protecting and strengthening the rental market. In relation to the pandemic, for example, we can look at, say, providing subsidies, grants, rent moratoriums, not only to B40 groups, but also to renters in general. And there also needs to be a clear guide on how to protect tenants through a more comprehensive tenancy act, which I believe is going to be built or tabled this year, right? I think we also need to address the increasing housing price head-on. What we can do is perhaps look at imposing stricter conditions that can be attached to loan guarantees or tax rebates given to developers. Another thing we can look at is also requiring developers to really reinvest their profits back into providing more affordable housing, that's number one, with also holistic amenities and making sure that they are built in areas that is safe, with vibrant communities. And most fundamentally is also to build them in locations where the demand for these affordable housing is at.